Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Tonight we have a celebration video because we finally passed 10,000 subscribers and much quicker than I ever expected. Yesterday before the live stream that I did with Mark from the Robes 08 channel, which thank you my brother for coming on. That was an amazing live stream. In fact, at some point in time we had something like 300 people watching, which is double or triple the usual amount of people watching. So that's all thanks to you. I appreciate you coming on, and it was really good chatting with you, and we're going to reciprocate the favor, and I'm going to go on his channel before the year is out. I'm also going to send him some vintage decants that we're going to have some fun with. But before that live stream, we were sitting like 250 subscribers short, and we probably got 300 plus subscribers in the last 24 hours or so would be my guess. So thank you to every single one of my subscribers, whether you're one of the first 100 to join the channel or whether you're the last subscriber that's joined before I did this video. I'm thankful and grateful to each and every one of you for being here. I hope you enjoy the content. I hope you kind of enjoy the ride. I have a very conversational style about me, so I hope it feels like I'm kind of talking to a friend about these fragrances. And so today is a celebration video, obviously. And the idea with the video today, and this was dropped in the Discord server, which, like I said before, if listening to YouTube videos is not enough for you, if you want to actually interact with the people in the community more, the Discord server has been actually pretty amazing. I mean, my phone goes off all day. Sometimes I just have to ignore it because it's too much, I'm working or whatever. But the Discord server connects people from the community. Noah set it up. And in that Discord server, I solicited some ideas for a 10,000 subscriber celebration video. I believe it was Angie, but somebody said you should do like an A to Z video. Okay, so, and I love the idea, but I have so many fragrances that I want to discuss. If I only did one version of this, it would leave out a lot of the collection that I would like to discuss. So, first fragrance that sort of pops into my mind when I think of the letter, we're going to go all the way from A to Z. We're going to do the vintage version today. Tomorrow, or maybe Saturday, depending on how much time I have, I'm going to drop the niche / artisanal version, if you will. We're going to talk about some niche, some artisanal in that video. So it'll be A to Z, first fragrances that kind of pop into my head. And so this is a great way to kind of show off the collection. I know people love these list videos, and it's a great way to kind of show what fragrances I am favoring, what fragrances kind of come to mind as a reference, if you will. I've also done a reference fragrance video if you want to check that out as well. So obviously this can't include everything, excuse me. They will include some things, I promise you. But keep in mind that some fragrances are just, you get a lot in the same letter for whatever reason. So there are some great fragrances that are just left off the list because another one took precedence, okay? So, but this will be a fun video to go through. And the second thing is I have some boxes that have been building up. So we're going to do a quick unboxing video before we get started on this. Like I said, it's a celebration video, so we're in no rush at all. So this first unboxing is from Angie, from the Steel City. She always writes with love from the Steel City on her packages. And so I'm just going to cut this bad boy open, and we're going to see what we get. I have no clue what's in here, by the way. I had no clue this was even coming. So this is from a member of our community, which I've been very blessed with, to have people send me stuff, as I have not been able to buy much lately with everything that's been going on. So very generous folks in the community, I'll tell you that. It's a beautiful community. So here's what we have. The first thing is, this is, oh God, there's a note in here. Let's see what we have. It says, I have no idea if this is turned, but the name itself warranted sending it. Tom Pierre Long Giorgio. I'll check that out later. I'm not even gonna mess with trying to open that right now. That'll have to happen later. Thank you, Angie. So that is one, and then there is a bottle of sorts. Whoops, never mind. They are samples. So Lanvin's Vetiver, which I wanted to smell for a long time. So we've got Vetiver, we have Yves Rocher Ispahan Eau de Toilette. I think she may have sent me the Eau de Parfum previously. And then whatever this is, It's a Castelbajac fragrance. I'll have to look into this later. And then we have Infini, I think, and Sicily by Dolce & Gabbana. So some good stuff in here. Thank you, Angie. Very, very kind of you. Very kind of you to send these along. To anyone who sends me anything, just know that we're probably 1,000 videos backlogged of trying to knock out some, you know, early impression videos on samples like this. So if you do send me something, just please know that, you know, it's going to go into the pipeline, and I will hopefully get to it as soon as possible. As soon as humanly possible. Okay, so these are going to go here for now. I will put those away properly later. And then we have a fragrance box, quick unboxing from the house of Rising Phoenix. Now, this is a house owned by a gentleman named Joseph DeLapp, and it's actually a house that I've been wanting to smell for a long time because he is good friends with Sultan Pasha, and I love Sultan Pasha's work. I am a fan. I'm a big fan of Sultan Pasha. In fact, the reason I love Sultan Pasha so much, other than he's just a fantastic person, if you haven't seen my Sultan Pasha interview, I would urge you to check that out. There's an entire playlist on the channel, an interview playlist, and the Sultan Pasha interview is on there. Love chatting with him. And really, he was the one who truly opened my eyes to the possibilities of attar, right? Many times I would get on here and I would say things like, oh, I go everywhere in the fragrance community, you know, I go cheapies, niche, you know, designer, vintage, modern, all this stuff. And then, but the reality was, it was a big blind spot, and that was the attar world. Attars are like a world of their own. And some of the first versions of attar that I smelled were things like Henri Jacques, which I'm not a fan of that house, okay? They seem very overpriced for what you get. My 2 cents. I'm much more like Sultan Pasha's work. You know, the creativity, the ingredients, everything just really appealed to me. And so, you know, I've done some Sultan Pasha reviews. You can check that out. But that really opened my eyes to the world of attar. And this guy is another house that basically does something very similar. So he does these little attars. And so, for example, you have Rising 2023 Musk Rose. I don't want to open these because, you know, it'll take a while to kind of go through each one. But the idea is that he uses real oud, real musks. You know, he does them in these little attar sections. And, you know, from what I've smelled, and I've only smelled 1 or 2 from him. I think someone sent me something like this once. And I was like, wow, this is impressive stuff. I really liked what I was smelling. So his manager reached out to me and said, hey, man, I see you've been doing some interviews. Would you like to have, I think he goes by JK, if I'm not mistaken. Let me see if I can see what he goes by real quick. Rising Phoenix. So yeah, here's this Musk Rose attar right here that I just pulled up earlier. Yeah, Musk Rose. Cambodian oud, champaca flower, henna musk, Mysore sandalwood, oud, rose, Russian rose centrifolia. So you get the idea. It seems like really high quality ingredients. He goes by JK is what he goes by. So JK DeLapp is his name. And I was like, well, I would love to have him on the channel, but I don't know any of his work really. So they were like, okay, we'll send you some things for you to kind of get to know. And that's exactly what they've done. So I'm actually really excited to dive into this. I love exploring these type of houses. These are the type of houses that have really piqued my interest lately, because of the fact that the designers have just felt, you know, you're getting the same old, feels like you're being charged more for less, and here it feels like you're getting like real Cambodian oud, you know, real Mysore sandalwood, the stuff that you're not getting in the designer space. So here's some, man, I'm gonna have to see how you properly burn these, but this says it's Sinking Na Trang, and this says it's 2014 Laotian monk. So I'm guessing these are like incense sticks that you just kind of burn. So that'll be awesome to try. I must admit, I have never really burned, I mean, I've burned incense sticks, but the kind you get from the gas. I've never burned proper like incense sticks like that. So that'll be interesting to try. And then they put these in there. This is the last thing, and then we'll get on to the A to Z video, which I know you guys are very much looking forward to. Okay, so this is more oils. So more attars, more oils. So I'm gonna have to spend some time on these, obviously. And then the other thing is another oud house called East Bengal Agar Company, which is one of the companies that Russian Adam collaborated with when he did his history of oud, the history of oud series, which I have talked so highly about. One of probably my favorite oud series of all time. It just kind of gives you oud straight with some perfumer's alcohol, and so they're sprayable perfumes, but it's like just smelling pure oud. It's like putting pure oud oil on your skin. And one of the companies, the history of Bengal oud, they collaborated with the Agar, East Bengal Agar Company on that. I have a review on the channel if you want to check it out. So yes, very excited to get to know JK's work, and hope to have him on the channel one time. So thank you for sending this my way. Okay, so let's get to this A to Z list. So first we have some honorary mentions, and the reason we have some honorable mentions is because, well, actually, before we do that, I want to do scent of the day, and I talked about this yesterday on the live stream with Mark, but I'm wearing this again back to back. Well, yesterday was such a beautiful day with the live stream and everything that happened, and so I just almost wanted to recreate. I love this fragrance so much, and once I get to this much, I'm like, damn, do I just want to wear this until this is gone? But this is Tigerlust by Ensar Oud. This is a pure Parfum. This was actually sent to me by Thomas from Early Greek, which he took all of his videos down. But wherever you are, Thomas, I hope you're well. I miss seeing you on YouTube reviewing stuff, man. But so this is Tigerlust, and Tigerlust is probably one of Ensar's more animalic fragrances. It has that sort of Ensar sparkle about it. You get the ambergris, but even though this is one of his more animalic fragrances, it's not really animalic. You know, it's not animalic in the sense that, you know, it doesn't have that heavy hitting animalic feel that you get with some of Riesler Dorés or stuff like that. Ensar's wear much, I would say much, he doesn't like to use animalics in the same way that Russian Adam does. And so here it's Sri Lankan oud, real ambergris, black currant, tobacco, Sichuan pepper, castoreum, Chinese oud, Indonesian oud, so already 3 types of oud in here, civet, orris root, frangipani, Timor sandalwood, osmanthus, and this note called coffee blossom, which I talk about in the review I've done of this. But man, I am just infatuated with Tigerlust. I would love a bottle one day, but it's very expensive. So Tigerlust is my scent of the day. Okay, so now let's get to the honorable mentions, because these are fragrances that never had a chance to be in the video because they are numbered fragrances. So there's 4 honorable mentions that we're going to talk about, all vintage. The first one is from the house of Halston, and it is Halston 112. So actually, Halston makes a very strong case in this video, and they should, because Roy Frauwick Halston, he had such an influence on so many designers. I mean, I bet you Tom Ford would not be with us today in the sense of being Tom Ford if it wasn't for Halston. You know, Tom Ford wanted to be Halston. Tom Ford bought Halston's old house in New York. That's kind of how much Tom Ford has put himself into Halston's shoes. And one of the Halston fragrances was Tom Ford's signature scent growing up, and so it heavily influenced his work. And so this one's called Halston 112. And 112 came out in 1976, if I'm not mistaken. And it's the spicy green fougere cousin to Z14. Z14 gets all the talk, and it will be in this video as well. But Halston 112 is sort of this galbanum, green, maybe some artemisia, maybe some basil, you know, something in the top that gives it this green touch. And then you get the old school 70s pine needles, juniper berry, woods, oak moss in the base. If you're a fan of fougere fragrances, this is one that gets overlooked all the time, 112, but it's fantastic. Spicy, green, woody. It has some citruses in the top, but lemon and mandarin orange, and it has that old school carnation, which I love. It adds this spicy touch to it. I wish more masculine fragrances nowadays would use more carnation. Okay. Next on the list, another Halston. So as I said, Halston is going to get some play in this video. And this is Halston 101 Now, this is like the unicorn of the bunch. So this one you could actually buy pretty easily still. You just have to make sure you're going for, you have to make sure you're going for the one that says Halston 112, because the Z14 bottle looks almost identical. So just be careful with that. Halston 101 is a little bit of a unicorn. And I have to say, couple folks, Frank and his son Science Bear, kind of pitched in and sent this to me, and I have absolutely fallen in love with this. It is probably one of my favorite, I would say like a spicy fragrance, but what's crazy about it is there's this, almost like this ambergris meets powder. You know, it's very strange. Like, have you ever heard the story of, I think it was one of the English kings, and I bet you if you just Google English king ambergris and eggs, it will pull up. But in back in the day, they used to believe that ambergris was like a libido enhancer. Okay, so Louis the whoever, one of the Louis, maybe it was the French king. Excuse me, could have been the French king, either the French or the English king. And but they loved ambergris and eggs. That was like his breakfast every single day. And what's funny is if you think about that image, I just imagine him sitting there in this big powdered wig, eating ambergris, so you get the salty marine kind of aspects. And ambergris does this thing of kind of like highlighting the other notes. You know, it's like putting a spotlight on them. Here, it spotlights the lavender, the clary sage. The clary sage is huge in this. It's a very dry. It almost makes it smell slightly leathery. Like the ambergris is a little bit leathery. The clary sage is a little bit leathery. And then you just get hit with these spices, you know, thyme, bay leaf, so it turns very dry. Imagine like very dry bay leaf, and in the base you get leathers, ambers, cedarwood, tree moss, and musk, and geranium. And so if you can just imagine that contrast of like woody, very spicy, very spicy fragrance, but strangely powdery with the ambergris. And it's just, I've never smelled anything like this before, ever. I've never smelled a fragrance that smells like this. It's going to be a bitch to review, I'll tell you that. But this came out in '83, and so this is Halston 101. So this is kind of the unicorn of the bunch, and really enjoy wearing this. You can see the short ingredient list there on the back. So that's Halston 101. Okay, next on the list we have a fragrance from the house of JK Couturier, which is a very underrated house, and this was also considered to be kind of a cheapie back in the day. I think this was seen as maybe like a drugstore type fragrance or something, but what's crazy is once you really get into going back into the past, you realize that those drugstore fragrances from the past are many times miles and miles ahead of even the higher end fragrances today. And this one's called 12 by JK Couturier. And this is lavender, geranium, tarragon, fern. There's a fern note in here because it's supposed to be a fougere fragrance, but of course ferns have no smell, so the whole idea of the fougere is to create this fern-like smell. What would a fern smell like? So woods, musk, leather, and amber is the note listing. And I get a lot of leather, and this fragrance is kind of very piercing. You know, the fragrances from the past, one thing you'll notice once you really start getting into vintage is that they feel so much more full-bodied. They feel textured. They feel like they have presence about them. Many fragrances now feel soft and fleeting and incomplete and like something's missing, because something is missing. They took away kind of what anchored the fragrances down. They took away the real ambergris. They took away the oak moss in the base, you know, all this stuff. And, you know, these vintage fragrances, this fragrance especially feels like it has it. It feels like it is, everything in here is sort of amped up, done in the fougere style, but like I think of a leathery fougere, okay? This is from 1981, if I'm not mistaken. Probably one of the best fragrance years ever. Very classy, but also there's some strength about it. You know what I mean? That's what I like about this. So 12 by JK Couturier. And finally, the final honorable mention is going to be 1000 by Jean Patou. And at the time, 1000 was seen as the most expensive fragrance. It was supposed to be like, you know, the most expensive fragrance you could buy at the time. Because back in the day, Jean Patou had Joy, and then I think Bal Versailles kind of displaced it as the most expensive fragrance. And then so this was Jean Patou kind of coming back on top and saying, no, we have the most expensive fragrance again. And brands have competed on that forever. Just look at Clive Christian's marketing with Clive Christian #1. which it literally said on the bottle, the world's most expensive fragrance, you know, which I think is just cringe, horrible marketing, but they did go there with it. And I did review that on the channel if you want to check out a full review on that. But 1000 is basically, and this is a tester, so I've got kind of the quick blurb on the back. So it says, 1000 is a floral bouquet with a hint of woodiness, osmanthus from China, Bulgarian rose, absolute of jasmine from grass, a harmony of viola or dorata. I should have got my glasses. Or dorata, rose de mai, Mysore sandalwood, Indonesian patchouli. Now, these old Patou bottles, including Patou pour homme privé, you know, many of these old Jean Patous are so sought after by collectors. One of the reasons why Jean Patou pour homme, for example, goes for $1,000 online is because Jean Carlio, the very famous perfumer who kind of runs the Osmotech right now, he loved using lots of Mysore sandalwood and oak moss. The things that are basically banned now, he loved using. Okay, so so yes, this is definitely one to try out. My guess is that the first time you smell it, you're gonna be like, you know, it's very reserved, very classy, but very reserved. The reason is that Mysore sandalwood note can't be overshadowed. You know, the florals are beautiful. I love osmanthus. It gives it that sort of, you know, suede-like peach nectarine smell. But they didn't want to overshadow the Mysore sandalwood, and the Mysore sandalwood comes through here very evidently. But it's a soft smell. Most people are used to the sandalwood notes now that assault your noses. You know, it's like they rip the inside of your nose out. Back in the day, using real Mysore was a completely different experience. Milky, soft, buttery, spongy. You know, it had this feeling like you could just kind of fall back on it and just land on a pillow on your pillow top bed. You know, your mattress. It just had this softness about it. And it's such a beautiful smell. Real sandalwood is such a relaxing, just gorgeous smell. It just puts you in this peaceful state of mind. You know, this feeling of tranquility. And that's what 1000 is all about. Very high quality ingredients, but if you're used to smelling Le Labo Santal 33, that's going to be the exact opposite of that smell. Okay. All right, so let's get started. Let's get started on the A to Z celebration list. So A, obviously, A and B were maybe the easiest choices I've ever had in the entire video. And if you know me, you know a lot of what's coming, especially on the vintage side. This is not going to be a huge surprise to some folks, but A is, of course, Antaeus. And I have a full Vintage Hall of Fame review on Antaeus on the channel if you want to check it out. Antaeus came out in 81. This is probably the fragrance that if you said, Ramsey, you have to sell everything and keep one, this would be it. And if I could keep this and Antaeus Sport, then I could wear Sport in the summer, and I could wear this in the winters and falls, and I'd be set for life. You know, it's that kind of fragrance for me. It's the fragrance that's on the banner of my top of my channel, the Sistine Chapel, where it almost looks like God touches man, but just doesn't. You know what I mean? Just right there, and Antaeus is right in the middle, as if God's trying to, or maybe man's trying to give God Antaeus. I don't know. But, man, the castoreum in this, it's all about the castoreum. I mean, go watch my full review if you want details, but Jacques Polge and Francois Demachy, to me, created one of the all-time great masculines ever, you know? And the reason that I would say it would be my number one sort of signature scent is that it's classy enough. It has that Chanel class where you could wear it anywhere, but it has the animalic side, the castoreum, the dirtiness that still sort of pleases me, especially these older bottles. This is a bottle from the 80s, and it is just phenomenal. It is absolutely phenomenal. So yeah, go check out my review. I love the myrrh. I love the sort of beeswax note in there. I love the dark rose that comes through. I mean, I can't say enough about Antaeus. Okay, that's A. B, again, if you know me, this is no surprise. This is Bel Ami, one of my mini bottles. I would say if you can get the first formulation, which looks like this, the shaker bottle, or the second reformulation, do it. You know, if you can grab either of those, that would be my recommendation. The new stuff is, I mean, it's still good. It's still, Hermes doesn't do terrible reformulations like some houses, but it's lost a little bit of that what made Bel Ami Bel Ami. And Bel Ami is a 1986 release. It is one of my all-time favorite leather fragrances. It's also very spicy and very woody. Okay, so there's some cedar wood in here, but there's also orris root. Okay, so there's orris. Maybe you could say it's a little powdery. It's also a little smoky, but it has this leather note, which is just to die. I still need to review this, and I'm just thinking, how in the world am I going to review what I would consider to be one of the greatest leather fragrances of all time? My uncle used to own a boat up in New York, and when I was a kid, there were many summers where I would go on the boat for the very first time, and the first time of the season, the boat's been sitting all winter. It's covered, and you pull the cover off, and you go down there, and there's this feeling of, there was like you go below the deck, you can kind of hang out down there, but there was like wood panels, and there were like these old leather, kind of like, where the seats are and stuff like that. And it was cracked, and, people sat there, spilled beer on it and everything, but it just had that feeling of enclosure and this closed space. And Bel Ami always gives me that recreation of, the leather, the woods. And of course, being around friend. Bel Ami, I think, means beautiful friend. And so being around friends and family, and this could easily be a signature scent. If I couldn't have Antaeus, this would be my second choice. And it's A to B, so couldn't have set up any better there if I tried. Okay, next on the list is C for Calvin. And of course, we have Calvin by Calvin Klein from 1981. This is actually one of the bottles that, or one of the decants that I'm going to send to Mark. So when I go on his channel, we can discuss this. But I have a full review of this on the channel as well, if you'd like to hear my thoughts. But this is, my God, man. I mean, Calvin Klein's best fragrance was the first one, in my opinion. I also really love Obsession. I love Obsession, and I've reviewed the women's Obsession on the channel, but this is something special. Especially, again, if you like fougères. I would take this over Jean Couturier 12, by the way. I would place this above it. It is spicy, green. It's got mugwort, chamomile, bergamot, lemon, mandarin orange, neroli. There's something about this that is, like I said with number 12, there's something that's very bracing and sharp. It's very popular for men's fragrances back then to have this sharpness, to have this, personality, this growl to them. But also this fragrance has almost this relaxed feel. Chamomile has this feeling of maybe just putting you in this relaxed kind of mood. But this is a beast. I mean, this fragrance will stay on my skin all day. Forget reapplying. You don't need to reapply. And it has one of my secret ingredients, tarragon, which gives it this kind of anise-like sharpness. I love tarragon. IFF perfumers made this. I don't know which ones, but man, I'll tell you what, everything about this, the sandalwood, the patchouli, the musk, the oak moss, the vetiver, it's absolutely phenomenal. I can't wait to hear what Mark thinks of it. Okay, so that's Calvin by Calvin Klein from 1981. D. So D on the list was also very easy for me to choose. And this is one of many, many Guerlains to come. And this is Derby. And I've done a comparison video between the one with the wood cap or the wood outline, which is the Thierry Vasseur reformulation from 2005, and this one, which is basically the original from 85. It's not the Eagle bottle, but this bottle came from the 90s. I don't think they reformulated it between 85 and 96 or whenever this bottle's from. But this is, again, you talk about signature scent. This is one of those scents. It is a boss. This is a boss scent. I've described this before as you walk in wearing Derby, everyone says, "Shh, the boss is here. Shut the fuck up, dude." You know what I mean? Like, it has that feeling of just authority. Like, I'm here and you're here. And you stay over there, and I'm going to stay over here, but you're going to listen to me when I talk, kind of thing, right? That is the feeling of Derby to me. It is C-suite all the way. The original Derby had a little bit of a peppermint note, a little bit of a mintiness put in there with that chypre side. If you've smelled something like the original Burberry, also had a little bit of a minty bit. This has this peppermint bit in the top with mugwort, which is a very earthy, sort of woody type smell, lemon and bergamot, and of course, Guerlain knows how to do citrus openings. They know how to, every single thing here is class all the way. And the original bottle was supposed to be, they call it the Eagle bottle, but it was, if you look at the original bottle from 1985, it was supposed to be like a Roman soldier's breastplate. And the working name when Jean-Paul Guerlain was working on this fragrance was Centurion. And so it ended up being Derby. And you just, I mean, for me, this is a man in a suit. This is absolutely a man in a suit, or maybe even a tuxedo. Maybe even a suit isn't enough. Maybe a tuxedo. There's some pepper, there's pimento, there's rose, there's nutmeg, jasmine, moss, sandalwood, leather, patchouli, and vetiver. I've come to the conclusion that I think this wears like a Spanish leather, you know? It wears like a leather that's very, very, you know, Spanish. I've done an entire video on Spanish versus Russian leathers versus, let's say, modern leathers, if you will. But this wears like a Spanish leather. It wears, basically, Spanish leather equates to like skin of Spain, right? And this has this skin like realistic feeling, but if you can imagine, almost like not on a person, but there's like a little bit of a horse side to the feeling of the skin. Like imagine a horse's skin, but in a leathery tone, right? You're smelling bits of the leather, the saddle. You know, you get green touches from the peppermint and the mugwort, and it's just the most unbelievable leather chypre. Absolutely phenomenal. Derby by Guerlain from 85, sadly discontinued. Guerlain needs to bring that back since they love bringing stuff back. Okay, next on the list we have E. Now E was a lot harder for me to make a selection than I wanted, because there were a lot of other names in the E category that easily could have been here. You know, there were things like Eau Sauvage, there was Egoiste. Egoiste was probably the one that competed with this the most, but I decided to skip those, and because I wanted to go with the very first thing that popped in my head, and this is truly the very first thing that popped in my head, and this is Arolfa by Creed. And the reason that this is here, you can see the dent that I put in this. I love this stuff. Absolutely adore this. This is a smell of summer for me. Arolfa is, I think it's a Pierre Bourdon creation. I don't know that for certainty, but I think it is. It's not credited to him on any of the websites, but if you smell what Creed was doing, it's probably a safe assumption, but I would like to get, verification one day. But this is bergamot, lemon, basil, cumin, orange, rosemary, melon, which he loved playing with those kind of notes around this time frame. Violet, coriander, ginger, jasmine, pepper, cyclamen, musk, oak moss, sandalwood, cedarwood, and amber. This is the way I like my quote-unquote aquatic fragrances done. This, New West, and Ocean Rain by Mario Valentino. I like when the aquatic is kind of in the background. There's so much more going on here than just an aquatic. You know, yes, you get the melony. You know, you can imagine like biting into a watermelon or something. You know, it's very watery, it's very thin, and almost like just dissolves in your mouth and breaks apart. And there's this, there is a watery aspect to this. There's a aquatic aspect to it, but there's also a green aspect. It smells like you're smelling like pine, and you know, the rosemary makes it slightly oily. The cumin in the top of a aquatic fragrance, you know, like there is so many strange little twists and turns to it. Now, I think the newer bottles of Arolfa have kind of went more to the aquatic side. So if you've never smelled one of the older, let's say the 120 ml bottles, I don't know if the experience is exactly the same, but I'll tell you what, as far as if you said you get to keep a couple aquatics, Ramsey, this is right there at the top of the list. I love wearing this in the heat in the summer. It does what Creed does very well, which is freshness. And it's a beautiful, beautiful fragrance by what I think is probably Pierre Bourdon, but not 100% sure, from 1992. So E for Arolfa. Okay, F. So F, we're going to go with a fragrance that actually I just noticed I did not even grab. So let's grab it real quick, and let's grab some testers. So this is Furyo by Jacques Bogart. And so Furyo is Probably my favorite Bogart. I've got a review on the channel if you would like to check it out. If you want to see a full breakdown of Furio. But Furio, I'm going to spray it because I love this stuff so much. Furio is Furio is paint peeling off the walls. My buddy Thomas from Early Greek I mentioned said that this is strong enough to to fire up the eastern seaboard for a week. One bottle will fuel the eastern seaboard. It is just one of the most tenacious, strongest. I mean, it'll make your eyes water if you're not careful, but I adore this stuff. So if you like things like Koros, if you like the animalic fragrances, Furio is right on that edge, but it has a very musky smelling ambrette seed, which I love. Ambrette is a very expensive note in perfumery because it's known as musk mallow, and it's technically a plant, but it's like a musk replacement, if you will. But most perfumers use it nowadays to give off a specific smell. They don't use it as musk because it's very expensive. There are other cheaper ways to make a musk accord. So there's ambrette, there's lavender, there's old school carnation, which I said is very green, very spicy smelling. There's jasmine, probably jasmine sambac if I had to guess. Cinnamon, geranium, thyme, coriander, civet. So the base is all about the civet, oak moss, musk, patchouli, amber, vanilla, and vetiver. And the geranium here smells very rosy. So I would not be surprised if there was some rose aspects in here. It could just be the geranium, but the civet is pissy, dirty. You know, it has this, it feels like the animalics just spike in here, like a EKG machine, you know, monitoring your heart. The animalics just spike, you know, and they are not, I mean, they are almost front and center. It's a little bit scratchy. It could put you off at first, but I love these type of fragrances that have class, you know, they have style, they have a personality about them. That's the thing. They're not like anything else. If you have never smelled vintage, if you've never smelled Koros or Joint or some of these other, you know, fragrances that are in the same ballpark, this will absolutely shock you. You know, this will put you on your ass. So what I said in the live stream, and Mark said the exact same thing from yesterday, if something doesn't agree with your nose, don't just sell it or give up on it right away. Put it aside, come back to it in 3 or 6 months, smell it again. If you still struggle with it, give it another month or two, smell it again. See if your taste change, because your taste will change over time. These bottles, I got maybe, I don't know, a handful of them for 20 bucks from fragrancepie.ca. Now they're going on eBay for 180, 200 bucks if you're lucky. So, but I think this is absolutely brilliant. One of my all-time favorite fragrances from Ron Winograd and Thierry Vasser. I think this is one of Thierry Vasser's best creations before Guerlain kind of handcuffed him, if you will. Okay, so that's F for Furio. So G. So G, man, I could just smell this all night. I love Furio. So G is another all-time great for me. And to close out 2022, I did a top 22 patchouli fragrances. You can go check that. That was a live stream. You can go check that out. And this ended up coming in, let's just say, very, very close to the top. And this is the original Givenchy Gentleman. This is patchouli, honey, and animalics. Oh my God. I mean, again, you talk about another could be a signature scent fragrance for me. Givenchy Gentleman is, I mean, I don't know how you improve on this. I do think that there have been some houses that have taken this DNA and tweaked it a little bit, and I still enjoy wearing those type of fragrances. Like, for example, I recently reviewed a fragrance by the House of Tom Ford called Moss Brex. I will review Luciano Pavarotti from 1994. There's a fragrance from the mid 80s that was an absolute hit called Giorgio Beverly Hills for men. And I think all of those kind of take this DNA and just play with it a little bit, tweak some things here and there. Let's just say for the taste of the day, you know, you could call it patchouli through the years, but this is spicy. leathery, earthy, just scratchy. I love scratchy, dank, earthy, animalic smelling patchouli. And that's exactly what this is. This is, to me, this is the patchouli fragrance. Like, if you said, Ramsey, you get to pick one patchouli fragrance, I'm not even hesitating. It is the, original vintage version of Givenchy Gentleman. Now, this has gone through many reforms. It is still available. I have no clue what the current stuff is like, but man, this is definitely one. If you're a patchouli lover and you've never smelled Givenchy Gentleman, I would urge you, almost beg you, to get your nose on it. It is fantastic stuff. So Givenchy Gentleman. H. H was tough because H could have been. This is the one where I was like, God. I mean, you're talking about two of the all-time greats, but H could have been Abbey Rouge. It could have been Abbey Rouge because I do think this is one of the greatest masculines of all time. But since I'm playing the game fair, what very first thing that popped into my head for me, okay, is Heritage. Heritage for me, I think, is Jean-Paul Guerlain's masterpiece, especially if you can get the vintage gold cap EDT. It is absolutely phenomenal. It is the amber fougere to end all amber fougères, in my opinion. There's something like 25 or 26 notes in here, if I'm not mistaken. And what I love about this so much is that this takes old Guerlain's, that's why it's called Heritage, and blends it into this release. So if you've smelled things like Jicky, you'll smell Jicky. You'll smell the lavender in Jicky in here. If you've smelled Shalimar, you'll smell some of the vanilla from Shalimar in here. That kind of thing. It takes all of the things from the past and brings it into the future. And not only did it do that, but this was based on Foucault's pendulum, which was supposed to show that the Earth is basically going around the sun. So this not only swung to the past, but it also swung to the future. The patchouli in here was such an amazing, I think it was AC from the channel Smells Good said this was such a rock star patchouli that this also swung to the future and kind of predated L'Instant de Guerlain. The patchouli in here is what Beatrice Piquet used as kind of her springboard to create L'Instant de Guerlain. It is absolutely phenomenal. It's a revelation, this fragrance, to me. And when I smelled it, I was like, this is like nothing else I've smelled. And now that I've kind of gone deeper into the rabbit hole, there are fragrances that are similar to this that came years before. You could look at Ungaro Pour L'Homme #1, which came out, I think, a year before this. You could go back to Zeno's Davidoff, which has very much similarities to this. And Michel Almerac even said at the time that it was Shalimar that really sort of inspired him to create the base of Zeno the way that he did. And, you could go back to things like Eigner's Free Life, which felt like Zeno with a little bit of this weird grape, kind of muscat grape-like thing in there. But no one does it like Heritage to me. This is like the top of the mountain for what I would call an amber fougere. But there's so much going on in here. I mean, if you look at the notes, there's lavender, aldehydes, juniper, clary sage, bergamot, lemon, violet, petitgrain, and green notes. That's the top. Patchouli, which is the star. Coriander, geranium, pepper, carnation, balsam fir, rose, pink pepper, orris root, jasmine, cyclamen, lily of the valley. That's the heart. Sandalwood, amber, oak moss, cedar, and musk. That's the base. And it smells like there's some ambergris in here as well. Roja actually did a take on this called Danger Pour Homme, which I have reviewed on the channel. And, he charges $550 for 50 mils or whatever it is. And I like Danger, but all he did was take Heritage to me and, add some cumin and some civet is really what it feels like. He Roja'd it up, as I like to say. So value for money, that fragrance right there is through the roof. Probably a top 10 fragrance for me of all time, Heritage. Okay, now I was a little tough for me because there were a couple fragrances that could have made this list. And so for I ended up going with a tried and true, actually probably the only celebrity fragrance on this list though, I think. And this is from the house of Elaine Delon, which he just passed away within the last 2 or 3 weeks, I believe. I did a rest in peace Elaine Delon tribute video on the channel if you'd like to check that out. But he probably has what I would consider to be one of the strongest celebrity fragrance house offerings, and this one's called Iquitos. And Iquitos is absolutely phenomenal. It is out of this world good. Iquitos is a fragrance by the great Gerard Anthony, if I'm not mistaken. See, and what's interesting is in Parfumo, they don't actually list Gerard Anthony as the perfumer. They actually don't list a perfumer at all, but Fragrantica does list Gerard Anthony. And so there's a very interesting backstory to this. The backstory is that this fragrance was supposed to be, or let's say when this was created, it was created with the intention of competing for the Dior Poison Brief, which is a fragrance for women. It was one of the biggest hits in the 80s. So it was competing for Poison. And what's funny is if you smell these two side by side, you will definitely see that they were maybe going off of the same brief whenever they created this. But this did not get it. This finished in second place and didn't win. And this did win, of course, and ended up being catapulted to what it is today. But Elaine Delon came along and said, wait a minute, that is a fantastic fragrance. I'll have some of that. Took it, marketed it towards men. So there's a very interesting story because in the late 80s, masculine fragrances started to have more and more and more florals put into it. And this has a ton, this has a huge floral heart. This has jasmine, ylang, lily of the valley, orris root, and it opens up with these sort of musky, fruity overtones. There's nutmeg, flower, there's coriander, mandarin orange, lemon, rose, aldehydes, but it's the base that really, I think this is a very base-heavy fragrance. There's civet, there's oak moss, there's leather, there's castoreum, there's sandalwood, patchouli, musk, amber, vanilla, vetiver, and cedar. But it does come across as muskier than Poison, and to be quite honest, I would wear this 100 times over this. I like smelling this as a reference, but I actually like wearing Iquitos. And the marketing was like, you know, a plane flying over the jungle, maybe getting ready to crash or something. And if you look at the bottle, it looks like a snake's head. So the snake's eyes were the color of this cap right here. And so, you know, there's this green side to it, like you're in a jungle, but it's kind of musky and animalic, and it's just, I mean, phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal to me. For me, this would be my choice for I. Okay, so moving on to J. So J, J's another one that I would say could have went a couple different ways. Joy was an option for sure. Joy easily could have been on this list. JHL could have been on the list from Hermes. Dior Jules could have been on the list, but I have to play it fair, okay? Even though I think probably if you made me pick, Jules would be probably the choice of my favorite fragrance in the J category. The very first thing that came to mind for J is this, and this is called Joint by Arroco Barocco. And if you take a look at this Furio bottle, look at the color of the bottles. They're very similar, and they get compared to one another. But this is different. Joint is a little bit different, and it is my favorite Rocco Barocco fragrance. But Joint is different. It's a little bit of a different breed because what they've done with Joint is they have taken this kind of Furio DNA, which is animalic, civet, a little bit of the civet you kind of come to expect in the Coro style, right? But they've made it much greener. Yeah, this is much, much greener. And so what they've done is they've added things like, yeah, it's fresher, it's greener. They've added things like basil, which I've done. This is not a top 10 basil. If you guys want to really dive into like a particular note, there's a bunch of videos focusing on each note on the channel. So basil, mugwort, coriander, and there's other green notes in here. Maybe, I don't know what, I have no clue what it is actually. But there's some other green notes that are in here with some aldehydes. But what I love about this is that they've added honey and tobacco along with the civet. So you with Furio, it was really all about that rosy ambrette, very musky, but very like I said, the spiky animalics. Here you still get some of that. You get the civet and ambergris in the base. But you also get the green touches, and you get the honey, and you get the tobacco, and it's an animalic green, spicy, smoky, just floral blend of just goodness. Goodness gracious. It is phenomenal. Joint by Aroko Baroko from 1993. This is a fragrance that came out in the 90s, but it feels like it belongs in the 80s, if that makes sense. Okay. All right, next on the list we have, oh, so good. Next on the list we have K. Now, there were 3 or 4 letters in here, which I didn't even have to move a brain cell, right? It was like K, Kouros. No thought at all. I mean, Kouros to me is Pierre Bourdon's masterpiece. It is sort of a contrast of clean and dirty, right? But this is a very primal fragrance. I've always described Kouros as like getting into your brain and getting into the part of the brain where you don't control, right? It's the part of the brain where you're being influenced by what is happening in that part of the brain, but you can't control it, right? That's Kouros. Kouros is extremely primal. It's animalic, it's dirty, it's sexual in a way. And I think that what Pierre Bourdon did in the 80s is just absolute brilliance, because to create a fragrance like Kouros, which you have to remember that this came from YSL. This came from the same house that's doing shit like YSL myself nowadays, right? This came from the house that is just absolutely grenaded. They have done the Big Lebowski. The plane has crashed into the mountain. That is YSL, in my opinion, right now. I cannot think of a house that has had a bigger fall from grace, and they're going to come up again in this list. But for me, what Pierre Bourdon did, making a fragrance like Kouros, which is probably one of the greatest animalic fragrances of all time, and then coming back and making, and you can see it almost stain the atomizer there at the end. It has this pissy, looks like someone pissed all over the atomizer. And Kouros, my God, man. I mean, there's always been a debate with folks. Is Kouros a Chypre or is it a Fougere? I think it's a Fougere structure personally. Man, the aldehydes, the dirtiness, the animalis note in this was really amped up. So the story goes that when Pierre Bourdon was like presenting the fragrance to the buyer at YSL, he realized that the girl he was presenting it to liked the fragrance when he turned up that animalis note. So animalis, I think, is owned by Simrise right now. I don't know who owned it back in the day, but it's a note that's supposed to recreate the civet, okay, like a civet. I thought the older bottles of Kouros had real civet in them back in the day. Apparently they never did. They were always animalis, right? And so what he did is he realized that whenever he turned up the animalis note, she liked it more. So as the meetings went on, he turned it up more. And then when they met again, he turned it up more. And he said, if we would have met with her again and again, the animalis note may have been 20-30% of the portfolio by that time, or of the composition. But so this is still marketed, it's still available, but it's lost some of its. I always say buying Kouros without the silver shoulders is like buying Kouros without its armor on. It's so much more palatable nowadays. It's soapier, it's cleaner. It doesn't have that funk, doesn't have that feeling like you just took your hand and put it in between your leg and your crotch. That's what the OG Kouros had. It had this, like I said, it had this primal feeling about it. And it takes balls to put out a fragrance like this. No matter what you think of Kouros, whether you love it or hate it, it takes balls. And that's the thing that has been lost in the fragrance game nowadays. None of these houses have that anymore. They're all focus grouped to death. Everything is to the lowest common denominator, and it's just so boring. YSL myself may be one of the most boring fragrances I've ever smelled in my life. Like literally puts you to sleep. Boring, right? So for a house that did Kouros, fuck, what a fall from grace. So, okay, moving on from K, moving on to L. L is another one that there probably could have been a couple other choices here. But I ended up going with this because of the choices that I had. I think that this is probably the one that deserves attention because this style of Chypre really sort of speaks to me. And so this is a very animalic style on Chypre. But this is a very spicy, floral, fruity, animalic Chypre. And it's called Paco Rabanne's La Nuit. Now, Paco Rabanne has since done, or there's been some fragrances put out in the fragrance game that are now La Nuit de l'Homme and a couple other things. No. This is the original La Nuit. So the night, basically. And from 1985, this is the Eau de Parfum. Yeah, this is the Eau de Parfum. This is the Eau de Toilette. So maybe one day I'll do a comparison video. But if you like things like Teatro alla Scala, which is coming up on this video, it's coming up. If you like that style of fragrance, I would urge you to check this out. It is fantastic. Cardamom, bergamot, tangerine, artemisia, lemon, myrtle, rose, jasmine, peach, pepper, oak moss, civet, cedarwood, leather, and patchouli. Jean Guichard is the perfumer, the father of Aurélien Guichard, who owns that Maitrier Premier brand that I absolutely despise. I do not think Aurélien Guichard is 1/100th of the perfumer that his father was, in my opinion. I think that Jean Guichard was a little bit of a genius, and I think Aurélien Guichard is maybe getting by on his name and, you know, creating fragrances that are appealing to the masses, to the modern masses, okay? Not a fan of that house, but okay, now we go on to M. Now M, sticking with the Chypre theme, you know, M is another one of those that's like, this is a no-brainer, right? M is Mitsuko for me. It's one of the greatest fragrances ever created. This is a 2014 version of the Eau de Parfum, which is just phenomenal. It's so mossy and earthy, and it's got that peach. This is the fragrance that made the peach note in Chypre famous for the most part. Bergamot, citruses, jasmine, rose, ylang, lilac, and the oak moss in the base. You know, the earthy. That's what a Chypre is all about. Chypre is all about that mysterious oak moss. You know, the bergamot in the top. There's probably some patchouli in here, probably maybe even a little bit of labdanum, but this is spicy, and there's some cinnamon, vetiver, and amber in the base. And I'll tell you what, I have smelled all types of Mitsuko. This is the Eau de Parfum. I have the discontinued clock face Eau de Cologne. This is the Parfum de Toilette, which is an amazing bottle, by the way, with the heart shape there. I think this is late 70s, if I had to guess. And this is the Pure Parfum in what they call the rosebud bottle, because it's, you know, it is a rosebud. It hasn't blossomed yet, but just the beautiful bottles that Guerlain used to do back in the day. And this is phenomenal. The Pure Parfum is out of this world good. So yes, Mitsuko, I mean, every single version of Mitsuko I've smelled is fantastic. So you cannot go wrong with any of them. So M, Mitsuko. N. N was another easy one for me because one of my top 10 fragrances resides on N. Maybe I cheated a little bit because it was originally just called Hugo Boss because there was no other fragrances. But once more fragrances started to come out, they had to give it a different name. And so what they did is they called it Hugo Boss #1 because it is the #1 fragrance that Hugo Boss put out. And this came out in 85. And I did a full Vintage Hall of Fame review on this. And this fragrance is probably my favorite honey fragrance. And I've often said that this fragrance to me feels like a man who knows his responsibilities, a man who knows what he is supposed to do, who he is, you know, what he stands for. Hugo Boss number 1 is that fragrance for me. There's something about this. It is just, I love the pissy honey opening. Some folks say pissy honey. Who wants to smell like that? I'm telling you. The honey note, 80s were all about animalics, big, bold. You have to remember, there were no catalytic converters on cars back then. Everyone smoked, so your fragrance had to cut through the smoke, cut through the smog, and these type of fragrances did that. Antaeus, Koros, Furio, and Boss number 1. These are the type of fragrances that cut right through, and I love that about perfume back then. And God, the tobacco is just phenomenal. The tobacco, the honey. There's actually a green apple note in the top here, which Rich Mitch made the connection to Hugo Boss Bottled, which uses a green apple note. And who knows if this was like where that started. Interesting connection. So yeah, Hugo Boss number 1 for me is a top 10. You know, go watch my review if you want to see how much I love that. Okay, moving on to O. Now, O is, there's only one. It was never in doubt. There was never a competition for O, because for me, O is Opium by Yves Saint Laurent. Again, these two, you want to see a house that fell from grace. These two, compare this, right? Koros and Opium, to the absolute just hot garbage that they are putting out today, in my opinion. Allegedly, my opinion. And, you know, you just see a house that has completely lost their way. But Opium is a reference oriental for me. It's got that clove, plum. I mean, fuck, this is so good. Ambery, a Papanax. It's resinous, it's thick, it's rich, it's got the myrrh and all these balsams and resins. Like, just picture the perfect spicy oriental fragrance in here. Sandalwood, you know, labdanum, cistus labdanum, and just a little bit of castoreum to make it slightly dirty. It is just, to me, the perfect oriental. You know, obviously, Estee Lauder was not happy when this came out because she felt like Yves Saint Laurent ripped off her Youth Dew from the 50s, which she has a point. If you've ever smelled Youth Dew, Opium is very, very close. You know, but for me, I have Youth Dew. It is amazing, but for me, for my money, I would wear Opium all day. I love wearing this. I love wearing some of these women's fragrances that I have highlighted, or I will highlight it. I love wearing. Opium may shock you. Give some of these a try. Okay. We're moving on to P, and for P, we are going with what I would consider to be probably one of the best leathers in my collection. I talked a lot about it in my Spanish leather versus Russian leather versus modern leather video that I've done, and this is called Peau d'Espagne by Santa Maria Novella, and you can see right there, Peau d'Espagne, skin of Spain is basically what that translates to. This is, I mean, I would love a gold foil bottle for the collection. I've been looking for one forever, have not been able to find it. But this is just, you know, violet leaf, bergamot, jasmine, hawthorn, and birch. You know, and the birch comes off as very smoky in here. But it is so powerful. It's such a strong, powerful, spicy, leathery scent. I'm going to do a full review on this one of these days. But Dushan very kindly sent me this bottle, so thank you, Dushan. Released in 1901. It may be, to me, this may be like the grandfather of every single modern leather that you can think of. It is so good. Peau d'Espagne by Santa Maria Novella. My kind of fragrance. As a leather lover, you cannot ask for much more. That is everything you can ask for. Okay, next on the list we have Quorum, Q. And Q is Quorum for me. Actually, there were very few Q choices, believe it or not. So Q, Quorum by the house of Puig. My bottle actually broke, so I have decanted this. I have the juice, but I kept the bottle just to show you guys. Quorum is spicy, leathery. Many people say that this is like, you know, one of the fragrances of the 80s that you have to smell. It smells like, you know, jackets with elbow patches and plaid couches, and it's got that spicy, earthy, leathery type feel with lots of oak moss in the base. And it is that. There's some frankincense, which makes it slightly smoky, leathery. The tobacco note in here is very well done. But many people complain that it has this drab feeling about it, you know, like some of the industrial cities before they got their makeover, you know, smokestacks and just this dreary feeling. I don't necessarily get that. I could see how maybe someone could make that connection, but I actually really like Quorum, and I'm gonna try and talk about it some more. It gets kind of pushed aside because, you know, the bottle's broke. I don't pull it out that often, but I'll pull out the decant and wear it and maybe talk about it on the channel more. So that's Q Quorum. All right, next on the list we have R. Now R, I had to go very close to, so what I'm considering vintage is anything, let's say 1998 and before. Okay, so nothing in here is beyond 1998, but this one actually is at 1998. So, you know, we're right there on, I still think it's technically vintage. Most people say 20 years is vintage, so I'm going back even further. But this one's called Rocobar by Hermes. And this is the original bottle that came with the blanket. And they've done probably 3 or 4 other bottle types now. And Hermes does very good reformulations, but this is juniper, coriander, lemon, bergamot, cedar, cypress, cardamom, carnation, violet, fir, benzoin, oak moss, patchouli, and vanilla. And Jean-Claude Elena was involved in this, although he was not the in-house perfumer at Hermes yet, but he was involved. Along with Giles Ramy and Bernard Bourgeois. Those 3 perfumers made Rocobar. And Rocobar is much more modern than Bel Ami. Of course, Bel Ami in the 80s, my favorite Hermes. Rocobar adds a couple other things. It adds this very medicinal smelling cypress and fir and spices, but it sits on this almost like sticky benzoin and vanilla. And so it is, for the 1990s, I think it's a brave release because, of course, the 90s were all about the aquatic. So to do like a spicy, woody fragrance like this was really a little bit against the grain, but Hermes always just kind of did their own thing. But it's not my favorite Hermes, but for R, it fits perfect in a vintage. It's worth discussing, and it's definitely worth a sniff. You may love it more than I do. For me, it's Bel Ami all the way. But our first thing that popped into my head, Rocobar. Okay, next on the list is S. S is another one where it's like, there's no way. Nothing is dethroning this for me because this is one of those fragrances that I think is one of the greatest fragrances of all time. If you said, Ramsey, show me an iconic bottle, right? Show me an iconic bottle that represents just the past in fragrance creation, this would be it. Okay, so let me show you what that iconic bottle would look like. It would look like this. This is actually one of the flankers called Millesime Tonka, I think. But that's not what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about Shalimar. So this is the bottle that you've probably seen a million times. The most iconic bottle, in my opinion, in all of perfumery. But this is the vintage, I think this is a 70s eau de toilette. They called these like the Coke Guerlain bottles. And just look at, I mean, it's absolutely gorgeous, in my opinion. This came from Rich Mitch's house. So this was in the Rich Den. Now it's with the Ram. But this is, to me, my favorite vanilla of all time. You can't do better than this. This is the reference vanilla. And it is technically an Oriental. You know, Shalimar, and I can never remember, I need to start looking it up before I do this. I can never remember the names, but Shalimar was sort of modeled after the Indian garden in front of the Taj Mahal, which was extended by the Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan for his beloved main wife, Mumtaz Mahal, she died during childbirth. I think it was like her 12th kid or something. But she died during one of the childbirths, and he was absolutely, devastated. And of course built the Taj Mahal as like a monument for her. And maybe one of the most beautiful things about the Taj Mahal I've ever heard is that it stands like a solitary teardrop on time. And so if you think about his sort of sadness at her death, and of course all the beauty of the gardens, what the Taj Mahal stands for, the beauty, the perception of the Orient, that was Shalimar, but in 1925. And if you smelled Coty's Emerald, you have an idea of what this is like. But for me, I mean, Shalimar is the vanilla. It is the vanilla fragrance for me, and it has a little bit of that, skin. Has a little bit of that like two bodies making love, skin pressed against skin feeling. The saltiness that comes with that, the sweat. It has some dirty. It has maybe a little bit of castoreum in there, along with the iris and jasmine and rose, and there's a huge amount of bergamot in the top when it comes to Shalimar. Metallic, just a lot. I think it's something like 20%. I read is bergamot in the top, but I love the vanilla, the balsamic, tonka, and the oriental side, the spicy side. It is absolutely phenomenal. If you've never tried Shalimar, if you've never tried Opium, if you've never tried this next women's fragrance I'm going to discuss, you need to put these on your list. Okay, so tea. Tea goes first thing in my head for tea is a fragrance from the house of Krizia. And if you know, it is Teatro alla Scala. This is another one I'm going to send to Mark. So I mentioned I'm going to send Furio, Calvin, and Teatro alla Scala. So Teatro alla Scala is a spicy animalic chypre. Again, I don't know who the perfumer was. I wish I knew, but I've done multiple videos on this. I did a first impression, which absolutely knocked me out of my chair the first time I smelled this. I've done a comparison video between the EDT and the EDP. And I mean, the way that they use the animalic beeswax, the aldehydes, the florals, and just the power and the strength of the creation. Because Teatro alla Scala, if you're not familiar, one of the most popular opera houses, I think in Milan, or I think it's Milan. And so you just imagine like the fat lady singing at the opera house and really projecting with her voice the power, like you can feel it in your chest, right? That is like how I perceive Teatro alla Scala, and it's so easy for me to wear as a guy. These old fragrances are, some of these are more masculine than the modern day masculines, but Teatro alla Scala, and the bottle is an absolute work of art. It's a Pierre Denand, which if you're into that stuff, I've done a Pierre Denand video. You can go check that out if you want to see some of his bottle creation skills. So Teatro alla Scala. Again, there was not very many options for you, but in my collection, I got lucky because we have what I would consider to be a fantastic fragrance from the early 80s, 1981. Again, best fragrance year in my opinion. This is Charles Jourdan Un Homme. So the house is Charles Jourdan, the fragrance is Un Homme. Worked out perfect for you. The perfumer is Francois Caron, who's an amazing perfumer. This is anise, marjoram, tarragon, bergamot, lavender, lemon, cedar, carnation, cyclamen, geranium, jasmine, patchouli, leather, oak moss, sandalwood, amber, musk, and tonka bean. And if you have smelled kind of some of the fougères that came before, like think of things like Azzaro Poron from the late 70s, from 78. This has a little bit of that anise, but it also has a little bit of something like Calvin. It has a little bit of maybe Patou Porom in here, or Giorgio Beverly Hills Red. It has a little bit of that in there as well. But I'm gonna review this one of these days as well. It's on the list. It's definitely on the list. But if you like earthy, woody fougères, slightly leathery as well, this is definitely one to check out. Charles Jourdan Un Homme. Okay, so now we're on to V. And again, V, there's only one that pops into my head for V instantly, and it is the great Val de Nuit. Now, the first time I got Val de Nuit, I got the EDT, and I have it. It's there somewhere. The EDT is much more summery and light, and you still get the green aspects, but you don't get the thickness. You know, the X-Ray, on the other hand, the X-Ray is a completely different beast. Completely turned me around. In fact, I would almost say the X-Ray of Val de Nuit is one of the greatest fragrances I've ever smelled, ever. You know, it is so deep and rich. It's got galbanum, orange blossom, bergamot, lemon, mandarin orange, aldehydes, iris, vanilla, narcissus, oak moss, musk, orris root, spices, and sandalwood. Of course, Jacques Guerlain is the perfumer. It's very green, and really, when you think about this, its place in history, to me, this is, you know how I was saying potentially Peau d'Espagne was like the grandfather of all leather fragrances that came after. Well, this is kind of like the grandfather of all of, or the grandmother, since this was marketed towards women, of all of the green fragrances that came after. So you think about number 19, you think about the kind of the green revolution that happened in the 1970s with Estee Lauder's private collection and stuff like that. This preceded all of that by decades and decades. And the galbanum in here it is just phenomenal. It almost, you know, it almost smells like there's like a tobacco note in here, but there's not, you know, but it has that sort of crunchy, dry, hay-like feeling sometimes when I smell this. But then it has the very high quality powdery iris and Guerlainade vanilla, and it's just, you know, and of course Val de Nuit was sort of marketed by this night flight idea. Flying was like a big deal in the early 1930s. So you see the propeller, mine fell off, but there was like this Val de Nuit written in a propeller style here. Phenomenal fragrance. Okay, next on the list we have W. And W, again, there's not very many W fragrances to choose from in my collection, but this is one that deserves to be here, I'll tell you that. This is Wall Street by Victor. So Wall Street is... Wall Street's a fragrance that came out in the mid-80s, 1984 to be exact. It is discontinued, but it is Artemisia, basil, lemon, bergamot, juniper, cedarwood, patchouli, pine needles, rose, carnation, cinnamon, jasmine, fir, balsam, leather, amber, and oak moss. So think of, think of maybe a little bit of polo green in here, which was very hard to leave out. I'm not going to lie. It was very hard to leave out polo green from this list. But a little bit of polo green, and if you can just look at the marketing in here, look at the marketing. I just imagine somebody just sitting at this, you know, big mahogany desk or talking on one of those old car phones in the 80s. This has all of that feel in there. The old school carnation, the green Artemisia. You know, it's got fougere touches, absolutely. It's definitely worth a sniff if you're into the vintages. Absolutely worth a sniff. Okay, X, Y, and Z. So X, again, not many X fragrances to choose from, but we are in luck because we have Xarius by the house of Givenchy. Very Art Deco bottle, right? Xarius. Xarius is 1986 release. The perfumer was Alberto Morillas, which should make you giggle a little bit because Alberto Morillas in the 80s and early 90s, you know, because he did things like Romeo Gigli Peruomo and all this stuff, totally different to the Alberto Morillas that came later. The Alberto Morillas of, you know, the aquatic age, Aqua di Gio and all that stuff, totally different from the Alberto Morillas now that does the Gucci's and all that stuff, right? Totally different perfumer back then. There's like 20 notes, 25 notes in here, okay? But it smells like a proper up and down, you know, fresh style fougere, okay? Doesn't have the animalics of some of these other fougeres I was discussing today, like Calvin and stuff like that. Doesn't have that, you know, harsher aspect. This is kind of for the person that wanted to be much more professional, more dressed up, right? That's how it wears to me. And yeah, it's really like the dressed up, more professional smelling fougere, in my opinion. It's still available. I don't know what the new one's like, but this is the original from 1986. All right, so next on the list we have Y and Z. So Y, again, Y was an easy one for me. very first thing that popped into my head, Yatagan by Caron. I've got a couple bottles of this back when Caron made some amazing stuff. Apparently it's still available, but it's being marketed by Catalea Finance, which sounds ominous to say the least. But this is tarragon, galbanum, lavender, bergamot, petitgrain, pine needles, carnation, geranium, jasmine, patchouli, vetiver, labdanum, leather, oak moss, musk, styrax, amber, and castoreum. And, you know, for me, this is the smell of walking through the woods and stumbling across some leaves which are kind of been undisturbed, and maybe it's rained and moisture has gotten under there, and when you kick those leaves out, you get this hit of this earthy, animalic sort of, here, let's spray this, fuck it. It's a celebration, so let's spray the damn thing. Yatagan. And many people, when they say, oh, what are some of the old masculines I need to try from the past? Many people will say Antaeus, Koros, you know, and Yatagan is usually included in that, because the way that the castoreum was done is very, like, you know, think of like that brown color couch from the 70s. That's the way that the leather and all the notes just kind of blend together. It gives you that brownish kind of smell. And if you've ever smelled Punjab by the house of... if you've ever smelled Punjab by Capucci, you know, these two definitely share some similarities, Yatagan and Punjab. But yes, this is for why Yatagan deserves to be here. It is fantastic. Vincent Marcello is the perfumer. He did some amazing stuff, by the way. Vincent Marcello did Private Collection, which I mentioned earlier, and it's probably one of the reference green fragrances for me. He did Yatagan, and I'll tell you what else Vincent Marcello did. Z. We're moving on to Z. And if you know what's coming up, you probably know. Halston made an appearance at the beginning. They're making an appearance at the end. This is Halston's Z14. The fragrance that I said inspired Tom Ford to be Tom Ford. I reviewed the fragrance that Tom Ford released as an homage to Z14, and that's called Italian Cypress. You can go check out my review of that. I think this heavily inspired Roja's Apex and many others as well. Clive Christian's X, you could say, was inspired by this. But Halston Z14, I think, was given a bad rep because, you know, people found it at TJ Maxx or Ross for 10, 20 bucks. They thought it was a cheap fragrance. It's not, okay? This is one of my favorite cinnamon notes in all of perfumery. I love the cinnamon. Yeah, and I love the medicinal, you know, cypress in here. There's a feeling of freshness. Cypress done this way feels like it's like, you know, purifying the air in a way. There's this purification aspect with the heaviness of the cinnamon. Sometimes the cinnamon gives you big red gum feel. It does, but I love it. I love the oak moss, the amber, the frankincense, the leather. It's the patchouli. I mean, it's just spicy, woody. I can't believe Halston's discontinued this. I can't. This is an all-time classic for me. Halston Z14 from 1976. So that's my A to Z vintage list. I hope you enjoyed the unboxings in the beginning. You know, thank you very much to JK DeLapp for sending me some of these attars and ouds. I'm very excited. Thank you, Angie, for the idea and for the package that you sent me. And thanks to everyone who is subscribed. I hope you're enjoying the content. I will do a part 2 of this video, which will be the niche and artisanal world. So hope you got your seatbelts on for that. Thanks for sticking around to the end if you did. And as always, take care. Cheers, guys. Catch you next time. Bye-bye.